Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another Mandalorian review episode. And I missed reviewing last episode because I was so busy, so I've really been looking forward to this one. Special thank you, as always, to Vite Ramen, who is sponsoring this series. For those of you who don't know, Vite Ramen is, well, a ramen company and a phenomenal one at that. Their noodles are a little bit more expensive than the cheap stuff you might find in the grocery store, but they're really tasty, they're nutritious, and the company actually pays their employees a living wage, which is important. They've been by far my favorite sponsor to work with. They're super cool. They send me like an infinite supply of noodles, and they're currently doing a big EckhartsLadder ramen giveaway. There are 10 different prize packs which are very generous that you can win by entering for free, and I'll include a link down in the description and down in the comments section. Other than that, if you want to check out their website and just buy some ramen, you can use the code EckhartsLadder15 and the link down below, which will get you 15% off. You can buy the ramen in packages with different flavors or just single flavors. I honestly like all of them, but personally I would also recommend the garlic pork. Anyway, thanks again to Vite Ramen for sponsoring today's video. So, episode 7 of The Mandalorian. I just want to get it out of the way that I think this was probably one of the best episodes of the entire series, if not the best episode. I'll always have some sort of weird attachment to episode 2 just because I thought the world building was so great. I liked the atmosphere, and I think Baby Yoda's use of the Force was really unforgettable. However, this episode has basically everything. It gets the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda back into the main storyline, progressing the plot in a meaningful way. It reintroduces characters like Khalil and Keira Dune. And it had no major flaws. Like some of the other episodes had one weak part, whether it was an individual actor, like the waitress, or some action that I just felt like didn't hit quite right. This one I thought was perfect. Before we dive right into this episode though, I also want to talk briefly about the last 3, which were largely self-contained stories. Now, personally, the plot moving forward in a big way for me wasn't super important, and I liked the issue of the week type of thing because I really enjoyed the world building. I liked seeing the interactions between the child and the Mandalorian, and I really just enjoyed the character development and the new characters who we met. It's not very often in TV shows that you get a self-contained adventure with a beginning and a middle and an end. I thought the Tatooine one was perhaps the weakest of the 3, but I find now with this episode where we're back in a larger plot that those sort of side stories now feel even more memorable. They feel like adventures from a long time ago, which they obviously weren't, but certainly in a more simple time. I think it's very appropriate that a Western-themed show takes a second to smell the roses, to build rapport between the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda, and to go to all these diverse places across the galaxy. And in this episode, like I said, I think that break pays off, and I think had the pace continued at the level it was in episode 3, then by now we would have just been completely exhausted. And that's one of the problems with action shows or even some movies. If the level of threat remains really high the entire time, then it's hard to make bad guys feel really meaningful, and it's hard to make it feel like the characters are in any real danger. That's actually something that Breaking Bad, funny enough, did really well, and this show does too. But onto the plot itself, we start off with the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda going to collect some of the characters we've met throughout the series up to this point. First of all, we have Keira Dune, who appropriately is in like a fist fighting match, which she wins, albeit not without any difficulty. And I gotta say, she absolutely shined this episode. She's such a good partner for the Mandalorian because she's just as competent, but in a completely different way. It feels to me, whereas the Mandalorian relies heavily on his armor and his pure skill, Keira is much more tactically minded. And they just feel like a very realistic duo. The sort of camaraderie they have, both as warriors, makes sense. And although it was obvious probably that she would return after her first appearance, it's still nice to have her back. Then we move on to Khalil the Ugnaught, who is also one of my favorite characters, and I think a fan favorite as well, especially after this episode. I think it's really impressive that The Mandalorian has done such a good job of making us care about these side characters. Keira Dune could have easily just been generic rebel shock trooper, but there's something in her personality that makes us want to see more of her. The same thing is true of Khalil. He's super goofy, he's basically a clunky Muppet in the best way, but because he's so wise and so competent, I like having him around, and I think it's pretty telling that even after only 2 30-minute episodes, basically everyone was disappointed when he didn't choose to follow the Mandalorian on his adventure. Then we have IG-11, who a lot of people thought was dead after the first episode, but will pretty clearly have an even greater role in future episodes. It's my guess, and by the way, if you can't tell yet, there will be spoilers in this video, that he will probably emerge from the starship and fire at the troopers, perhaps even killing them and saving Baby Yoda. I think the child, however, will probably be MIA at this season end. Anyway, back on track. I really enjoyed IG-11's sort of rehabilitation, and I do like how Khalil sort of sees him as a living being. He talks about how there's no spark of life within him, but only when he's dead. The Mandalorian, however, is obviously on the opposite end, and I have to say I was a little disappointed. Perhaps my only complaint would be that we didn't get another flashback to the Mandalorian as a child, because I've consistently loved those, and given the fact that he's interacting with a droid again, and the same droid as episode 1, I think it would have made sense. But the Mandalorian, the child, and the new trio go out on the Razor Crest and head to meet Greef Karga, who at the beginning of the episode offered the Mandalorian basically a get out of jail free card. Here we get to see Yoda's force powers continue to improving. He doesn't quite know the difference between the dark side as he force chokes Keira Dune, but I just love the fact that he's basically trying to protect his dad. Yeah, the Mandalorian is only in an arm wrestle, but Baby Yoda sees it as some sort of combat, which is really funny. Speaking of, this was probably Baby Yoda's best episode as well. One of the things we noticed with different directors is that some of them, I think, really know how to handle a doll and an object that can't necessarily move like you'd expect a real baby to, while others don't. Funny enough, I think the best example of poor usage of Baby Yoda was in The Gunslinger, episode 5. Dave Filoni constantly had the mechanic carrying him around, and it just looked very obvious as a doll. This shot featured lots of shots of the child in its cradle, lots of focus on the face and the CGI, I presume, eyes, and there's just lots of cute moments. Hopefully some new memes will come out of them. Anyway, we of course meet up with Greef Karga and the other bounty hunters. He continues to be completely full of shit. He's a totally greasy character, one who you can never trust. He's always operating on several levels with the purpose of benefiting himself. He is still a very likable character though, despite that, and in the end, he joins the Mandalorian in an attempt to kill the buyer, who I don't actually think has been named yet, Herzog's character. We get a very Western campout. We have the fact that they have to hike across this desolate land. We see Baby Yoda use the Force. We see some remnants of the Empire, and we get to the final confrontation. Of course, the aesthetics and everything while this is all happening are great, but at the final meeting, we have the buyer talking about Imperial rule and how much more civilized it is than what's happening now, minutes before being gunned down, which I thought was a nice little irony. Then we get the moment that I think a lot of us have been waiting for, the introduction of Moff Gideon, who seems to have a proper Imperial force at his disposal. He's got death troopers, he's got dozens and dozens of stormtroopers, he's got a really cool troop carrier, and especially compared with the threats of the prior week, he is an absolute menace. By the way, because I've seen some confusion on this, mostly from people interviewing the actors, Gideon is his name, Moff is his title, just like Grand Moff Tarkin. His first name's not Moff. It's not M-O-F, I just wanted to make that clear. Either way, we get a very, very Western-esque scene with our bandits, our unlikely group of heroes, held down inside a bar or a saloon, as the law, in this case the Empire, is posted up outside with overwhelming firepower. And we have Khalil also being rowed down, essentially. A pretty dramatic shot of both him and the child on the ground, with Khalil presumably dead and Baby Yoda snatched and now in the hands of the bad guys. Overall, a crazy episode. A lot still that I didn't cover, but a lot to look forward to for episode 8. Now, episode 8 is very clearly going to advance the plot forward again. I don't think that this episode will actually end the plot arc we have going. I wouldn't be surprised, as I mentioned at the beginning, if Baby Yoda is still in enemy hands by the end of it. I think we might see the Mandalorians again. We should see IG-11 armed to the teeth once again, and hopefully we have some pretty badass action. But more than that, I want to be truly surprised. The show has been, at times, a bit predictable, especially episode 3, I would say, and the general plot arc moving forward, so I'd like something in episode 8 that really surprises me. I will say though, however, this episode did not feel like its short runtime time, and personally I'm really cool with these very tight 30 to 40 minute episodes. All in all, episode 7 was phenomenal, and I think The Mandalorian needed it, where some people had seen the last 3 of a little bit weaker. This was certainly up to the quality of the first 3 and perhaps beyond, but that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? Did you love episode 7 as much as I did? How would you rank the 7 episodes so far? I think if I were to, it would be 2, 7, 1, 3, 4, 6, 5. But each one so far has been absolutely phenomenal, and I'm just so happy we got this show. It looks like episode 9 will be contentious, to say the least, so it's nice that we've got this one thing that almost all Star Wars fans can get behind and support. We can talk about it pleasantly, and we can just enjoy without having to worry about too much drama. But that's all for today. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, please check out my sponsor, Vite Ramen, down in the comments. Again, they're doing a giveaway, and you can use the code EckhartsLadder15 to get some discounted nudes. But until next time, may the Force be with you.